Well, here it is, the first bowl of my long and illustrious career that is beginning in the bowl manufacture industry. Come along with us today. We're going to have some fun making this thing. We are going to have some more fun today with the tools. I got the grinder out. I'm going to try my hand at making some bowls. I've had a few friends request that I attempt to make bowls out of some rocks. And I've seen some online that are absolutely exquisite. They're of a different variety. Most of those are polished all the way around. A lot of them come from overseas or made by machines. I'm going to try it with just plain rough rocks. And I have a pretty good idea how it works, as I've made quite a bit of cut and polish stuff in the past. I've just never tried a bowl, so I've had the curiosity. Here's the rocks we're going to be working with. They're a little wet because it's sprinkling out, but this is a ventifact of basically a brecciated basalt from the Mojave Desert in California. Grant and I collected this quite a few years ago now. I'm gonna cut the bowl into the ugly side here to expose the beauty inside while keeping the nice wind polished surfaces on the outside. I'm going to do this Unikite from here in the Cache La Poudre River. Probably this side. This one will be kind of small. Piece of rose quartz from Wyoming. It looks free of cracks, so I'm thinking that's going to make a nice bowl. It's almost a peach color as opposed to a rose. And then this is a puddingstone from the Yellowstone River in Montana. And this is actually a leftover half that I have from a previous project. So I'm going to take advantage of the fact that it was cut on a nice big saw that I don't have anymore. And I'm going to hopefully make a nice little bit bigger bowl out of this one. All right, for my anchoring system, it's kind of primitive. I really don't have many tools for this yet. I'm just starting to, what's the word I'm looking for? Starting over again after a very long time. So I am going to use wet sand in this container that's also roughly the size of these rocks. And I'm thinking, because it really doesn't have to be held very tight, but basically settle that down there in the sand, and that holds it plenty for what I'm gonna do. And basically what I plan on doing is making a bunch of cross cuts roughly in the area where I want the bowl to be, the polished part, and then try to chisel out with a screwdriver. I could use a chisel, except the slots are going to be very narrow. But the more of it you can bust out without actually grinding, you save on your diamond tools. And so if there's any big chunk I can remove without actually grinding, that would be best. So let me get the camera set up here, and we'll start to have some fun. If you guys try this at home, remember dust mask and safety glasses. Silicosis is not fun. And it's really not windy today, so the dust is going to kind of linger. One thing I immediately realized is that the top of this ladder is just a little higher than where I prefer it to be for this function. In the granite shop, we had adjustable height tables, and so we would have the table at one height. I would have it at the height that I preferred when I was cutting the sink out, or any other cutting that I was doing, usually down maybe where the middle step of the ladder is, or even the step immediately below where I'm cutting now. And then to polish, I would crawl inside the sink and I would raise the table up to about the height where I'm cutting now. And that was a nice height, or even a little higher. So these are things that I'm learning, and in my new shop, should I ever get that far, I have a long way to go, I want to make sure I'm set up with those kinds of things. This will all take place in theory in the shed behind me there. And I'm excited about it. It's a big project. Quite a few things has to happen. Among others, I'm in the process of clearing a space for another shed where everything that's in this shed will be placed. And if I want a saw that will cut more than 5-inch depth, which is a 14-inch blade, then I need to have different electricity brought into my home, and maybe even run out to the shed. And that's a big expense. I'm not sure I'll get that far. But these are all things I'm thinking about and working towards. So this is an experiment today. And that's one thing I noticed, is this is a little too high for me. We'll go ahead and speed this up for you 10 times so that we get through this a little faster. All right, I hope you guys can see this from there. I basically just made a bunch of slices, and in theory I could stick the screwdriver in. Maybe not. Nope. This puddingstone is a very hard rock, so I might have to just grind this out. I don't really want to hammer on it, so I'm gonna keep going across like I started to do. It's amazing that sand sets up like concrete. It really works pretty good. In more recent years in the granite industry, most of us use wet grinders. So it's an angle grinder like this, but it has a water feed that sprays the water on both sides of your blade, and it's very convenient. One thing to keep in mind when I'm doing this, I want to make sure none of my plunge cuts, for lack of a better term, go too deep. Obviously, I don't want to cut through the bottom of the stone, but nor do I want any of my cuts to be really any deeper than any of the other ones. Obviously, in the center, you want it a little deeper. Toward the edges, it needs to be shallow, so you have to keep paying attention when you're doing this kind of cutting. I can say this from much experience because shaping the inside corners of sinks, which are round, is very similar to making this bowl, and so the same principles come into effect. You don't want to cut too far, you don't want to grind too far, you don't want to make a dip in one side of the sink, and then it just really leads to problems. So it's better to go slow and careful. Hope you can hear me. So now I'm going to use the diamond cup wheel and finish shaping it, and I have a finer cup wheel that I'll go over it with. I will spare you all the agony, as this ended up taking quite a while. A lot of grinding. It glazed over my cup wheel, and I had to sharpen the cup wheel on sandstone, and it would be a very long video, even sped up by 10 times. So we're going to skip ahead here to the polishing stage. All right, I'm quickly finding out why the guys that make these custom out of local river rocks and things like that charge as much as they do. But I think we got it close enough. I can go get the polishing equipment. I was thinking we could get all 5 of these roughly to this stage, but no, it's at least with my current setup, it's harder than I thought it would be. Of course, I started with a really hard rock. So I'm gonna go ahead and get my polisher and we're gonna polish this baby up. Okay, got the polisher out, put the grinding stuff away, and here's the bowl so far. It's already looking nice. I must say I'm proud of my first bowl. I've got a couple of deep grinder marks in there, but I think I can get them out pretty fast and efficiently. There's my pads. We've already gone over this in previous videos, the polishing process. So let's just have some fun and see if we can get this all prettied up. Starting with the 50 grit. And again, to review, for those of you just joining in, it's basically like sanding wood. You start with a coarse grit, in this case 50 grit. It's all diamond pads and resin. And work your way down to about a 3000, or I should say work your way up to. And then we have what's called a buff pad, which gives it its final shine. All right, let's make it shine. I believe I mentioned it earlier. These pads and this particular set of tools is mainly designed to polish straight edges. Straight outside edges, like of a countertop or a table. They're really not designed to do inside corners and bowls. And so with the bowl, I'm running into many of the same issues I did when I was doing the inside corners of the sinks, or inside corners of, for example, if your countertop is shaped like an L, to polish that corner is really hard on the edges of the pads. It destroys the edges of the pads, the edges of your cup wheels, leaving the middle part untouched, and so you get very uneven wear. And it also really lends itself to gouging your material, cutting in too far, especially if your pad is new, like a 50 grit. You can really do some damage. So I'm having those same issues here, and it's nothing new. It's really exactly like polishing sinks. Let's go ahead and speed this up again for you. Looks like I got some mud on the camera. Sorry about that, guys. That happens in the granite business. Okay, so the remaining pads are basically a repeat of the same process. So I will spare you the other 6 pads and show it to you when we're ready to buff it. All right, I'm up through the 400 pad, or the number 4. Again, depending on what system of pads you're using. I don't feel any more grinder marks. I'm gonna go ahead and dry it off though and make sure, because like I told you guys in the previous videos, whatever you don't get out by the number 4, you're not going to get out if there's a scratch or anything like that. So I'm going to pause here and get it dried off, and let's see what we got. It's dry, and I can't see anything wrong with it at this point. It is getting dark out, mostly because it's cloudy. But it looks good to me. I'm going to roll with it and get it polished. I'll show it to you when it's all done. I just got it done up through the what would it be, the 800. And it occurred to me to check it again because I felt something. Your fingers, when you do this, your whole life, you get very sensitive to any imperfections. And sure enough, I think I just got water on it. Anyway, there's a tiny little line there. Yeah, it's right on the edge of the water drop. Anyway, I need to go back and get that out because I want this to be nice. So I'm going to go back to the 200, at least on that spot. There it is, dried off again. Considering this is my first one, and I don't see any other scratches. It's just that one, tiny little scratch. But I'm picky. I'm going to try to hurry up before it gets completely dark out here. The buff pad, as you can see, is quite different from the other pads. Walk around here. So the other pads are diamonds in resin of various grits, but the buff pad is actually, I believe it's tin oxide, and it's, I don't know, 6,000 grit or something. It's a extremely fine. Very important that you keep any sand out of it. And we run it slightly differently. We run it a little slower, a little drier, not dry, but enough so it sticks rather than just slides over the stone. So I'm going to show myself buffing just because I haven't done that in the other videos yet. These, when I was in the business, were about $100 each. Maybe they've come down some, 95 bucks or something. Everything to do with stone is extremely expensive. Bear with me and I'll get set up here. This buff pad is fairly new. I remember my preference was always that they'd be kind of worn out because they seem to work better. But I don't really have any worn out ones, so I guess we got to wear them out on something. You want it really centered. In my experience, I always found that the buff pad worked best when there was just enough water so that it wouldn't burn or be dry, but not so much that it would slide easily over the stone. You want it to kind of stick. And my polisher is so old, I was having a hard time adjusting the water down to just a trickle. I want it to just be a drop and a drop and a drop, and it was either coming out fast or wasn't coming out at all. And so that's what I was struggling with there. And here's a nice bowl that you can drink from. One way to know if you got a good polish, I remember when I used to feel my edges as I was polishing countertops. If you could, I don't know if you could hear that in the video, but my finger squeaks on it. Squeaky clean. And it's the same with stone. Took a really nice curve. I'm using pads that are probably too big. I bet you the 2-inch pads or 3-inch pads would work better. Mine are 4-inch. And again, mine are meant for, like the table there. Mine are meant for polishing edges like that. And of course, I would polish the inside corners of sinks and have the same issues that I'm having with this. It would burn the edge of the pad and not use the middle of the pad, and all the same issues. So this really isn't too different from what I was used to. I'm real happy with it. This is a Yellowstone River Puddingstone. Beautiful phenocrysts. They look like they have some nice veining going through each one. Super hard material. Very happy with my first bowl. I don't like to only do videos of what I'm really good at. I like I like to have a record of my progress. Like if I could go back to my early granite fabrication days, the way we did things was horrible. And of course, back then there wasn't really a propensity to record stuff. So other than a few old photographs, I don't have a record of it. But I'm not making that mistake again. This is my first bowl. I'm sure it's primitive in terms of efficiency. But there, it's recorded. Love you guys. I sure appreciate your comments. Of course, like and share. That really helps us. And if you haven't yet, subscribe. We'll be doing more projects like this. I'm in the process of getting my shop set up. Of course, I got to have a place to build it first. So as you saw in my most recent video, if you watched it, I'm cleaning out a spot in the yard for another shed so that I can empty the good shed and have my workshop in there. Anyway, there'll be more projects like this, and I look forward to seeing you guys on the next one.